Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and yeah, I pirated a game, man. I'll be real. I lived life on the edge. I broke the rules. I broke the law. Honestly, I expect federal agents to be at my doorstep, putting me in handcuffs because I dared to pirate a video game from 2009. Now, you might be like, Muta, what prompted you to do this, right? Well, I was just somebody that wanted to play an old game, wanted to just relax, have a good night. I wanted to vibe out a little bit. And so I downloaded Splinter Cell Conviction. Now, these games are only like 8 gigabytes, so it took, honestly, a minute to do. It takes me longer to take a dump than download these old games, all right? And honestly, it's better than downloading a 60, 70, sometimes 100 gigabyte experience. So anyways, I just decided to hit that big old green play button, and I thought everything was going fine. It fired up that Ubisoft launcher, it gave me that little Ubisoft intro, and bam! I saw this error screen. Game startup awaiting first OC connection. Now, I thought, man, maybe I could hit the escape button and, ignore this dialogue prompt, but nope, you just exit straight to desktop. Yeah, this game is completely unplayable. Now, remember, I actually bought this game off of Ubisoft, and just to give you an idea, right? You can go to the Steam store page right now, and you can buy the Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Echelon Edition. You can buy all these games for $40. You can buy these games for $40 and you get completely ripped off. Now, it turns out this isn't the only group of gamers that actually has this problem. Turns out the guys who love to play games like Assassin's Creed 2, and I made a whole video talking about how awesome Assassin's Creed 2 is. You should check it out. I do love this game. I really do. And turns out the DRM has also said the same thing to those players. Those guys can't even play the game that they downloaded. And also, fun fact, that game is being sold on Steam for $20. Notice, multiplayer and online features are no longer available. Bro, the whole game isn't available. Fuck the online and multiplayer. The single player isn't even available. So why is it that a single player game, Muta, requires you to have any form of online connectivity? What's wrong? What happened to gaming? Well, back in the day, 15 years ago, this video by Eternal Damnation, boy, that name sends me back to high school, uploaded a video. Assassin's Creed 2 DRM is terrible. Now, if we watch this video, muted, by the way, because you definitely put in copyrighted music, guy buys a game, loads it up online, and lo and behold, at some point down the road later, the game gives him a dialogue prompt. An internet connection is required to play this game. Fail to connect to the Ubisoft master servers. Please verify that your internet connection is functional. All right, so that's pretty goddamn serious, right? And then he goes on YouTube and like, all right, guys, subscribe and like and comment, which I highly think you should, okay? I think you should go from 53 subscribers to whatever God allows him. But let me tell you something messed up over here, man. Back in the day when these games dropped, they had one of the shittiest DRMs. So, for instance, if you bought this game on the Xbox 360, and even if you bought it on, the iPod Touch back in the day, things would work. If you just have a 360 lying around and a copy of Splinter Cell Conviction, slap that disc in, and you can play with yourself, or you can fucking find somebody else and play split screen. What a novel concept. However, the PC version implemented Ubisoft's new DRM, which requires a permanent internet connection. So when you played games like Assassin's Creed 2 at launch on PC, let's say that for a second your internet went out, okay? Like some blurb happened, and you're just minding your own, playing the single player, something that doesn't even touch the internet. Well, Ubisoft would just put this giant, little screen on, it's just this flashing white light. It'll just say, hey, when you get that internet again, you can play the game you paid for by yourself. What a shitty concept. Now, because of how entrenched this dog shit is, the modern Ubisoft releases are now broken. Ubisoft's done something that's completely destroyed this one game. And you might be like, but Muta, wasn't Splinter Cell Conviction a bad game? I've always wanted a John Wick video game, not the John Wick Hex video game, but one where you could run around, blow 10 dudes in the head, and just use the craziest combat features imaginable. You can do that with Splinter Cell Conviction. It's just a good game. I like this game. And you know what? It doesn't even matter what the quality of the fucking game is. I can't even play a Ubisoft game that I bought all the way back in the day, back in the 2010s, in 2020. You know, people are always like, why would you play old games and you're going to have internet forever? You know, this is a perfect example of I have internet forever, right? Like, I'm really using the best internet possible. Why am I not allowed to play an old school fucking PC game in 2025? How is it just not possible? Why am I getting these brain dead errors? So at this moment in time, ladies and gentlemen, I had to go to the dark side. Okay, how do I play a game that I actually paid for? Well, there's two options, okay? You can tuck your tail between your legs and you can walk away. Or you can sail the seven seas. You can find the fittest of girls in the gyms around you, and maybe they might have a copy of a game that you want to play. I'm not advocating piracy, by the way. I really think piracy is a sinful, wrong thing. It's illegal. It's unethical. You won't be allowed into the kingdom of heaven from what I've been told. But yeah, the idea is I had to actually go on and find a copy of Splinter Cell Conviction and cracked exe files in order to get this whole situation functioning. So I figured, why not make this a bit of an educational video for the audience watching, right? Now let's say that you're somebody on the magical world of Linux, like me. And you're like, Muda, how do you even like install these third-party games without Steam and all this other stuff? Well, just to give you a legal analog, another game that I wanted to experience from my childhood was Guns the Duel. Now, if you've never played Guns the Duel, think of a combat shooter, an arena shooter that requires you to be on like a metric fuck ton of Adderall to play. That's a game. So I went to a private server, F-Guns, Freestyle Guns, which is probably the only large Guns the Duel like area that you can play on. I made an account, and lo and behold, I scrolled down. It's a pretty nice website. I even saw that the #1 player was Donald Trump. You know, if the president of the United States is playing this game with a level 99, 3.11 KDA, from South Korea, you know it's got to be a banger game. So I decided to just go over here, download the file, and it would give me an actual exe file that I could install. So at this moment in time, sites like this also provide like a Linux guide, but I'll show you how this works. So using a program on Linux known as Lutris, you can actually install versions of like Windows software and video games underneath this like, layer. So what you do is you go to this big plus sign, you go to install a video game from an executable, and then you can name it whatever you want. So here I can call it Guns or Guns Freestyle, and as long as I just basically hit install here, it'll ask me for a setup file. So I just give it a setup file. It asks me for an installation directory, which it'll auto-generate based on the name. I just hit the words continue. And here I can just go into the setup file, browse, go to my downloads, and right over here, I'm sure I can find F-Guns installer. So as soon as I hit OK, as soon as I slap that installation right over here, all you'll notice is it's generating a configuration for me. So what it does is, much like Steam for Linux, it creates a little directory, a small kind of like Windows installation, a light installation, that allows me to install Windows applications. So for instance, right here, it'll ask me all this setup. So assuming you're installing any kind of third-party software, whether it be, I guess, acquired through the open seas or through a legitimate channel, all you got to go through is follow the typical instruction on Windows. So it'll give me the basic next. It'll ask me to wait for the agreement prompt, which I will. And then, of course, it'll say, hey, install to your directory. Now, this directory may not reflect what you just saw in Lutris, but that's because this is following a traditional Windows path, right? Generally, it will be installed under the directory you saw in the Lutris client. So go next, hit next. You can even ask it to make a desktop shortcut. Go next, hit install. And Bob's your uncle, once this is done, all of a sudden, you can now go to your Guns Freestyle. And sometimes you may have to go right-click, browse the files, and just go to the Drive C over here. You can go to Program Files x86 if the install was 32-bit, which for Guns it is because it's such an old game. But if it's a 64-bit game, just go to Program Files. And again, once you go over here, you can go to Freestyle Guns. Let me just get rid of this right here. And as long as you find the launcher file, which for this, it's actually guns.exe in the directory. All you have to do is go back to the actual install you made. So right-click, configure, and of course go to Game Options, and underneath Executable, you can go all the way to the end, and as long as this reflects, so here it's actually auto-tagged it to launcher.exe. Well, that's actually the right answer. So again, some experimentation is required. If you find launcher or game, it's really just try either one and see which one works best. So at this moment in time, all you do is double click the actual launcher, and like a Windows game, or really anything, it'll just launch the actual thing for you. So here it is, fguns.net. So here I can just hit start game, and boom, I can play Guns the Duel. Now this also extends to other installations as well too. For instance, I went on my GOG account and I decided, you know what, I wanted to play an old game from here. So this is kind of a good legal analog to something that you would find floating in the 7 seas of the internet. So what I did was I went to Alpha Protocol, really good game. I decided to download all of those original installers, and the same process effectively applied. I just went to Lutris again, installed it like I just showed you, and boom, I actually had Alpha Protocol, and all I have to do is double click on this, and I have the entire game ready to play. Now, to go back to Splinter Cell, how did I fix my option? Well, I decided to go on Reddit, and the closest thing that I found was 5 years ago. Some guy was teaching how to run Splinter Cell Conviction on Windows 10 in 2020. It's crazy to think that 2020 was like 5 years ago, man. Time really does fly. But you know, when I was looking at the actual information over here, it led me through like a guide that I felt like I needed a college education to understand. Like, you wanted me to go through so many menus over here, and it really didn't have to be this complicated. All it really took me was going into the old, open seas of the internet and finding an old ISO file alongside a no CD crack. So yeah, once I found this pirated copy of the game that was available on a site where I could also download iStripper. Yeah, by the way, these no CD cracks do come with what appears to be triggered like malware results. Like, you'll find things like this triggering in your Windows Defender or antiviruses. And generally speaking, like, these sites will say these are false alarms, but again, none of this should be done without any, again, it's all up to you, right? Like, it's all up to you if you want to risk your computer or anything by doing it. But anyways, you know, I downloaded these like, DRM fixes and fixed files, and I actually installed a pirated version of Conviction, which surprisingly worked. Until I found out that, guess what? The DLC didn't work. Yeah, you know, the DLC that you also pay money to play, which actually comes with a few cool maps? Yeah, that also required me to do further fixes to this. So thankfully, I found the Splinter Cell Fusion Fix mod, which if you go all the way down over here, you can download this Fusion Fix, and it actually adds a whole bunch of options. Skip intros, restore LAN support, partial ultra-wide, all the boons that a company like Ubisoft should have probably provided, but they didn't. But most importantly, add an option to unlock DLC content that's unavailable after servers shut down. Now, again, when I pirated Splinter Cell with the no CD cracks and this mod, I did it also on my Steam Deck to show you like how this works. So yes, following the same instructions that I gave you earlier, wow, almost Linus Tech Tips my Steam Deck, you can go over here and boom, hit OK, and lo and behold, thank God for Piracy, because I can fucking play this game again. How stupid is that? And not only can I play the game again, but if I'm gonna just check the DLCs, yeah, I have access to all of the extra maps as well. So, you know, God bless video game piracy, because without video game piracy, I would not have been able to play this old game that I was enjoying. And especially when I map the controls to controller, I can play it just like I did on my 360 with triple the frame rate. That's crazy. You know, the thing about Splinter Cell and Ubisoft is they'll do really stupid shit. Like, on May 30th, they tweeted out this, like, image of, like, Sam Fisher, like, from a CGI cutscene in the original games. And it's like, bro, you're not even doing anything with the franchise. What do you do? What are you doing at this point? You don't even care about Splinter Cell. Why is the company so busy getting their social media manager to tweet about this stupid bullshit when they're actually selling you fraudulent like software? They're selling you games that do not work. These are games that are actively on the store and they're broken as shit, and Ubisoft isn't fixing it. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. You might be like, why are you screaming to the void, old man? Because honestly, I have a voice, and I feel like my voice can at least reach someone at Ubisoft. So instead of actually continuing to scam the audience by buying these experiences, they can probably spend just a little crumb of their money to set aside a team that can maybe fix a lot of their older games. You know, ironically, what's even wilder is like Capcom has Lost Planet 2, which is another great game. It just doesn't work because of games for Windows Live. But you know what they did? They removed the purchasing option because they knew it was better to not sell people a lemon. Unlike Ubisoft. Yes, we are talking the bare minimum of at least delisting your fucking game so that you can try and attempt to fix it. Not that I think Capcom will. So it's better to play this on the RPCS3 emulator with the PlayStation Online, by the way. Games like Assassin's Creed 2, fuck Splinter Cell. Assassin's Creed 2 is probably arguably what shaped Ubisoft into the modern monolith that it's become. Why can you at least not fix something that old and gold? I don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm sure I'm not the only person screaming. You know, literally like 4 hours ago, one user was like, yeah, I was trying to play AC2 and that shit would give me an error. Game startup OC. Yeah, I know what it's like, homie. If anyone has any solutions, please help. Apparently, this problem started on June 4th, and only some people have found a solution. You know what the solution is, pal? Pirate the game. In fact, the top post is literally pirate the game. Just pirate the fucking game. Why? Why have we gotten to a point where we have to like pirate video games just to play the software that we bought? Either refund the people their money, Ubisoft, which I know they definitely won't do, or just fix the game. Simple as that. You can even steal from the community fixes themselves and just do it. Just patch it into the game. Just give people something, man. You know, it's like maybe they need some time away from like, you know, this massive sexual harassment trial that they have, which I guess maybe must be taking away their time, right, from focusing on all this. Where, yes, 3 executives in Ubisoft are actually in trial in France right now, accused of creating a company culture that allowed systemic harassment and sexism to thrive. So 3 guys, Thomas Francois, Serge Hassachet, and Guillaume Patrux have been accused of sexual and moral harassment. I don't even know what moral harassment is, but goddamn. I mean, it's a pretty serious trial, obviously, when one of the claims is one of the actual like defendants in this case showed up to a breakfast on a business trip with just straight up like porn on their phone and told their colleagues that he jerked off this morning. And Francois reportedly said, "I shouldn't have done that in front of a woman." The rest of the allegations were addressed, according to Le Monde, with denials or explanations. For instance, in response to questions about racist or homophobic remarks, he said he has gay friends. I'm not racist. I've got black friends. The black friend turns out to be like, yay. This is so stupid, man. But I mean, honestly, from a serious perspective, right? Like, according to one of the lawyers over here, they said, I've been a lawyer for 25 years, and I've seen some sordid files, but on this scale, never. So even if their victims are broken, used, if certain victims can no longer set foot in the company without the threat of being subjected to the same treatment, I want to underline the strength that they have. Now, of course, I don't doubt that Ubisoft's still showing up in every trade show and like E3 event or like, you know, game event that you could imagine. You know, especially from an industry that like a couple of years ago pretty much was on, what was it, like Blizzard's throat, rightfully, for some of the most insane breast milk stealing culture that allegedly existed over there. So yeah, it's kind of insane to me to see this. Like, Ubisoft, just goddamn give us back the game. Just like, fix your game. It shouldn't be this complicated. It shouldn't require me, the gamer, the guy that spent money on your product, to break the law just to play a game from like 15 years ago on a computer, right? Like, it shouldn't have to be that way. Unfortunately, it is. And I feel like unless actual pressure is applied to Ubisoft, or at least like, not even pressure, like at least if they know something is broken, then at least hopefully they can either delist the game, which I don't want that to be the solution, or better yet, just fix a single player game so it doesn't need to connect to the internet just to fucking play. That makes no sense. That just doesn't make any sense. Brother, make it make sense. Please. But anyways, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hopefully you learned how to install third-party games on your Linux system. I wanted that to be a little bit educational just because people have always asked me, how do I install third-party stuff? And using things like Lutris or Bottles or really any container software is the best avenue. But that said, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like it if you dislike it, I am out.